Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
Which punishment, either real or fictional, sounds easy enough to endure at first, but is actually hellish to experience? Waterboarding. One of my favorite moments was some shock jock radio guy who, after it came out that the Bush administration was using it, defended waterboarding as not torture. He was so adamant that it was not, he volunteered to be subjected to it live on air, saying he could last some crazy time, 5 or 10 minutes, IDR. So they did it, they waterboarded him on air and he lasted all of a few seconds before he completely changed his tune and admitted it was in fact torture. Eric, Manco, Muller was the DJ. The Archer episode where he calls everyone names because they were afraid of waterboarding and then they find out he skipped the interrogation resistance training was great because they cut to him after and of course he is harried and they have no sympathy, lol. https://u2.be/y72ypv7zh4i. He even points out that he's actually drowned before, yet waterboarding was worse. Christopher Hitchens was also waterboarded. He also did not have a good time. He was very gracious about it afterwards, completely retracted his previous opinions and challenged others who defended it. I tried it 20 years ago during a conversation between me, my girlfriend and her brother. Her brother was adamant it was torture. I was adamant I could endure it. I leaned backwards over the sink, placed a wet rag over my face, my girlfriend held me steady. And her brother poured water over my nose and mouth. I think I lasted 1, maybe 2 seconds. What I hadn't realized was that the act actually induces a deep, lizard brain response. I immediately felt terror and saw bright white. It was visceral, nor did I realize that so much of the water would go into my mouth and sinuses. It's awful. I did something similar in the shower. Just took a washcloth, stood under the shower with it over my face and turned around and tilted my head back. Immediately felt off. I probably lasted like 3 to 5 seconds. I know that wasn't real, but I figured the real thing would be even worse. Kneeling on rice. My grandparents used to threaten us with this and it sounds like nothing until you actually try it. After just 5 minutes it literally feels like needles digging straight into your bones. It was a favorite of the Japanese imperial forces in WW2. If you can stomach it, read Knights of Bushido by Lord Russell of Liverpool. My grandma used grits instead of rice. I still have the scars on my knees. Then she made me clean up the mess of corn and my own blood that was left on the kitchen floor. And she has the audacity to wonder why I don't speak to her anymore. Was just about to comment about the grits. My grandma did this to me a handful of times between the ages of 5 to 7 and my knees are still scarred. That was the worst growing up and sadly was super common and still used. Either kneeling on rice or unused cat litter. Very hard on the knees after a few minutes. In Hungary, kneeling on corn was popular. That is also very painful. My dad experienced this, but with dried beans instead. He had to do it alongside his brothers while naked too. Probably part of the reason he hated his dad as a child. Probably solitary confinement. At first it just sounds like quiet time alone, but in reality the isolation and lack of stimulation can mess with your mind really quickly. You need a few hours of it. But you need to not have more than that of it. Just spent 32 hours with my mom in the hospital and by the end I was pacing and putting my head against the wall like a caged animal. Is she okay? Long hospital stays are truly maddening. Especially in the ICU, where there's constant alarms blaring and some patient down the hall intermittently screaming in pain. The constant alarms invade your nightmares and everything feels like a fever dream. The only good part is that they usually keep you on enough drugs that you're not fully mentally alert and so time just kind of passes by in a blur. There was an episode of Law and Order SVU where a guy was in solitary for something like 15 years and Stabler didn't think it could have been that bad so he agreed to do it for 3 days. At the end of the 3 days, he's completely lost his mind and accused the guys working the jail that they left him in there for months. I'm sure it's overly dramatized but that episode has stuck with me for years as I'm sure the real thing is just as fucked up. Just to erase any unintentional hyperbole, Stabler accused the guards of leaving him in there for a week instead of just over the weekend. But yeah, that is still pretty telling of what solitary is like. I used to do volunteer lab studies when I was in college. One of them was all about testing heart rates under different conditions and some were pretty unpleasant, like having my arm forcibly held in ice water. The worst, however, was a special examination table that could slowly turn from lying flat to standing vertical. One of the experiments had me very slowly go from laying flat to almost standing straight up. For whatever reason, being vertical but not quite standing makes your body freak out. It quickly becomes incredibly unnerving and painful, just existing in that state of neither standing or laying down. Makes sense, as bipedal animals our walk cycle is essentially controlled fall so as soon that cycle is disrupted reflexes kick in to either regain balance or cushion the impact. Edit, turns out it's not an inner ear thing but a blood pressure thing. Details are in the article here. Props to you, Fcuman, for setting the record straight. Case in point, leaning too far in a chair and you feel the center of gravity tip over the chair leg. Hey, I'm a PhD student doing some pediatric cardiovascular work and can try to explain that tilt test. I haven't used it, but I've read about it. When you go from laying down to standing up, gravity acts to push blood into your lower extremities. This can be problematic as veins can really expand to hold a lot of blood, so if you force blood into them via gravity, suddenly a large portion of your blood exists in your expanded lower body veins and isn't returning to your heart. Without blood returning to your heart, your blood pressure drops because a now limited amount of blood is being pushed out of your heart during every heartbeat. Low blood pressure is concerning as your heart needs to eject blood at a high enough pressure to force the blood up towards your brain. Think of a garden hose turned on a little bit versus a lot. This is why when standing up suddenly, you can pass out, limited blood to the brain. Our body has two mechanisms to fight against this pressure drop. 1. When you stand, your lower leg muscles contract. This means they literally squeeze the blood back out of your legs like a yogurt tube. In a tilt test, where they strap you to a table and tilt the table upwards, your legs' muscles don't contract, so they can remove this effect and study mechanism number 2 in isolation. This is also how people who are crucified, or held vertically for long periods of time can die. Blood can't get out of their lower body. 2. Low pressure signals get picked up in your arteries and sent to your brain. Your brain will send out sympathetic or fight or flight signals throughout your body. Some of your blood vessels are stimulated by these sympathetic signals, leading to their constriction. Just like a yogurt tube again, blood is squeezed back to your heart. This also happens when you exercise. Your brain tells your whole body to constrict its blood vessels so that more blood can be made available for the working muscles, where the blood vessels will actually dilate. So tilt tests can be a really effective assessment tool for how does your brain control your blood vessels and heart, because we've removed any other methods, leg muscles working, from having an effect on them. Any effect we see must have been the brain's doing. That last one is called a tilt table test. I've had one done and my blood pressure dropped to 65/40 and I almost puked and passed out. Genuinely awful. I also did the test and my heart stopped. I watched it on the monitor. My final words was, 9/10 would recommend. Felt sweaty and gross when I woke up though. Stick your arms straight up in front of you. Arm remain 90 degrees to body for 5 minutes. Chinese teacher punishment style. In basic training, the drills would make us do this if they were bored, so a bunch of us would turn it into a competition to see who could hold out longest. Changed the punishment dynamic. We had the same thing as punishment. Variations included holding a battery or similar object between 2 fingers as well, or doing it with knees bent and leaning against a wall, or both. If they heard the battery hit the floor, everyone does push-ups. Chinese water torture for sure. Just drops of water hitting your forehead repeatedly, how bad could that be, right? But apparently after few hours you start going completely insane from the constant drip. The anticipation between each drop becomes worse than actual pain. Sleep deprivation is another one. Staying awake doesn't sound that terrible until you're past 48 hours and reality starts getting weird. Your brain just stops working proper and everything becomes nightmare. Mythbusters had an episode with the water torture and it was actually difficult to watch how hard Carrie Byron broke. She was not okay. I think they all mentioned that was one of the experiments they wished they stopped earlier instead of pushing it. It wasn't worth it. It was the restraints that did it, not the water. Adam had the same mechanism dripping onto him except he was relaxing in a comfy chair. He fell asleep, later woke up when he badly needed to pee. I remember visiting the zoo one day as a 14-year-old girl in the 90s with my family. We saw a crowd gathered around the big cat exhibit early in the morning. We walked over to investigate. Inside was not a lion or tiger, but a woman wearing a bright neon orange shirt that said, "Animal Abuser," in capital letters on both sides. She was picking up tiger dung with her hands, only gloves, no shovel, and carrying it to a wheelbarrow. Thought it funny at first, but seeing how violently she was retching and even threw up once into the wheelbarrow must have not been a fun experience. I remember a zookeeper came by the gathered crowd at one point and said, "We'll have the cats out on exhibit as soon as she finishes up. Then we'll take her back to clean the night houses. If she's struggling out here, I really don't envy her having to go in there. I've been in the profession for 20 years and I still struggle with that stench. Honestly, pretty satisfying. What the hell? So many unanswered questions here. It is a form of community service. Sometimes judges require the offender to agree to some rather unpleasant community service conditions for cases where jail time is a serious possibility. Probably punishment in lieu of prison time for her animal abuse. These types of punishment are elective and she could have stopped at any time and just went to prison instead. I have seen this exact sentence carried out at my local zoo fairly recently. I love that this is a thing. For those who enjoy schadenfreude, the tiniest segment of a tiger's dung, such as in the foreground, bottom here, is much larger than a Great Dane can produce in one sitting. And everyone knows there is nothing meaner smelling than cat shit. Sleep deprivation sounds manageable until your brain completely stops functioning properly. In high school, we had a trivia team that would participate in the local college radio Trivia Weekend, which is non-stop trivia from Friday evening to Sunday evening. Basically, the station asks a trivia question, almost never common knowledge, usually requires in-depth research, such as a particular phrase said by the Doctor in a 1975 episode of Doctor Who, or something, and you call in the answer and your team gets points. The smart thing, of course, would be to set up shifts so everyone had the opportunity to sleep, but being kids we would always try to stay awake through the whole weekend. Every single year without fail, someone ended up in the ETA, not because of sleep deprivation itself, but because of accidents caused by, or other health issues exacerbated by, the disorientation lack of sleep causes. Closing parenthesis. I developed really bad insomnia because of depression, and after 2 or 3 days I was hallucinating a lot. I distinctly remembering sitting on the steps in the school I was in, trying to ignore the whispering I could hear all around me.